It's hard for you to say.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized till I read the book that you were in psychoanalysis for some time.
Yeah.
What drove you to do it?
My marriage. The fact that I was unhappy.
Your
And
first
thought,
marriage?
Yes.
To Mary Slattery.
And I thought that that would teach me something that I didn't know about how to live. Well, it really didn't. It just illuminated the fact that I didn't know how to live. And that I could have told you in the first place.
The Millers kept their marriage together through the early 50s, a period in which he produced The Crucible, a play about the Salem witch trials. That play opened during the hearings of the House Un-American Activities Committee, and the parallels were striking. A few years later, he heard from the committee himself. They wanted to ask him about some left-wing meetings he had gone to.
They wanted you to name names.
Yeah.
And what'd you say to them?
I said, look, I'll tell you about me, but I'm not going to tell you about anybody else. Had I thought, put it this way, that somebody I knew was a spy or working against the United States, that'd be a different story. What are we talking about? We're talking about actors, a few playwrights, most of them were actors, directors. What earthly effect could these people have on security in the United States or anything else?
And they held you in contempt?
They voted me in contempt, and we appealed it to the Court of Appeals, and they threw it all out.
Your friend Ilya Kazan named names.
Right.
You couldn't accept that.
No, it seemed to me to be a wrong thing to do.
Ilya Kazan had been the director of All My Sons and Death of a Salesman.
Kazan had been your good friend.
Oh, yeah.
Collaborator.
I loved him. Very close friends.
And that simply split it.
Yes, it did.
How long didn't you speak?
I don't know. It was a number of years.
It was during this time that Miller divorced his first wife, Mary, and his impending marriage to Marilyn Monroe became headlines in the tabloids. Miller maintains that his appearance before that committee, in a strange way, had more to do with Marilyn than with the committee's search for communists.
Chairman Walter proposed to my lawyer just before the hearing began that if it could be arranged for him to take a photograph with Marilyn, he'd call off the whole thing.
The congressman wanted a photograph with Marilyn Monroe.
That's with himself.
Yes.
In the picture. We could have aborted the whole thing in 5 minutes.
And
that's
declined
why
to do it.
Yeah. And I didn't do it.
Their marriage caused a sensation. Arthur Miller moved from the theater pages to the gossip columns.
You know that people said at the time that you were together, what in the world is Arthur doing this for? Arthur is an innocent. What in the world?
No, it was
Arthur
exactly
Miller
that.
and Marilyn Monroe?
That innocence is exactly the point. She also, in a way, was moving into a world she knew nothing about. The world of getting up in the morning, making breakfast, and living in a... That was an innocence there.
Did she want that, do you think, or...
With part of herself. She wanted it with part of herself, yes.
And with the rest?
She wanted to be a great star.
He wrote about her, I never saw her unhappy in a crowd. Her stardom was her triumph, nothing less. It was her life's achievement. The simple fact, terrible and lethal, was that no space existed between herself and this star. She was Marilyn Monroe, and that was what was killing her.
You knew that it was doomed.
I didn't know it was doomed, but I certainly felt it had a good chance to be.
You said to her, I keep trying to teach myself how to lose you, but I can't learn yet. And she says, why must you lose me?
Well, it just shows you the power of instinct over what's left of your brains at such moments when you're being drawn to someone and you sense that it may not work and you can't stop it anyway.
Your face changes when you talk about her.
Excuse me?
Your face changes when you talk about her.
In what way?
Well, I think you're still... Those were tough years.
Terrible.
Wonderful years and terrible years.
Sure. They were. Oh, there was a lot of pain. Certainly for her, and certainly for me.
Why? What did it do to you?
Well, it's a defeat. It always is.
And she was for you quicksand.
In a way.
Yeah, but you could have lost your way. Matter of fact,
well,
there are those who feel that you did lose your way for 5 years because of...
Well, you could say that, I guess. At the same time, She was a great person to be with a lot of the time. She was full of the most astonishing turns and revelations about people. She was a super sensitive instrument, and that's exciting to be around until it starts to self-destruct.
And you and Marilyn were divorced when?
About 61.
And you married Inga a year later?
Yeah, later, yeah.
Today, at the age of 72, Arthur Miller spends most of the time at his house in the Connecticut countryside. He has been married for 25 years now to Inga Morath, a world-class photographer. They have a daughter, Rebecca, who is a promising young actress. He has a small cabin on the property where he still writes every day.
Writing every day, right up in that building.
Plays?
Yeah, I'm writing a play now. Don't ask me why, but I love doing it.
Miller's behavior outside the committee's hearing room was even more astonishing than his legendary stand against forced betrayal in the name of national security. During a recess from his testimony on June 21, 1956, Miller played out the committee's scheme for his own gain, tactically electing to disclose for the world's ear that he was soon to marry Marilyn Monroe. Richard Rovere, in a column devoted entirely to Miller's engagement, contends that Miller's appearance before HUAC would not have produced much in the way of publicity, perhaps a headline of only moderate size, mainly because this sort of thing had become too routine to warrant them. Instead, Miller turned the tables. He went out into the hallway and told the reporters of his wish to clear up all this unpleasantness because he was booking passage for himself and Miss Monroe as Mr. and Mrs. Miller to England, where she was to make a picture and he had business of his own. Commanding enormous headlines with his choice piece of gossip, Miller startled and amazed everyone, including Revere and including Monroe. Revere said of the announcement, "It was more than odd. It was symbolic, portentous, rich in paradoxes and fulfillments, and of course it was, as it should have been, full of good theater. What a backdrop, what timing, what a way to steal a scene." Unlike the Hollywood 10 or his friend Elia Kazan, Miller really had nothing significant to lose and everything to gain in not answering questions that would implicate others and tailoring his appearance before the committee as closely as possible to John Proctor's in The Crucible. With America's reigning sex queen at his side throughout his ordeal, Miller looked more lucky than victimized, more sympathetic than suspect, more masculine than intellectual, and more heroic than communist. This idea of himself that both Miller and Proctor staunchly refused to relinquish was, after all, less a matter of private conscious moral integrity and more a public reputation as an innocent intellectual liberal martyr. In a rare glimpse into Miller's psyche, David Hare tells the story of hearing Miller on the radio respond to an interviewer who asked him whether he hadn't needed extraordinary courage to oppose the authority of the House Committee on Un-American Activities. "Not at all," Miller replied. "After everything I'd written, if I hadn't defied them, I would have looked a complete idiot."